Welcome back to All About Winning Daily Fantasy Sports. My name is Ty Patton. In this video, I'm going to break down the research and strategy for the running back position in Week 6 of the NFL. Before I get started, I just want to remind you guys that I build lineups primarily for the main slate. So if you see a running back that's not listed, or you're like McCaffrey this week, he's not in the main slate. He's actually on the Sunday morning game from England. That game will be at 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. Obviously, he's at the top as far as touches and things like that. So when you don't see those players, that's because they're either on a bye week or they're in one of the primetime games, and the Thursday night, Sunday night, and Monday night. I do try to do a showdown video on the Thursday night and Monday night, and by week 8, I'm hoping to have the ability to implement the Sunday night showdown as well. So with that being said, the first thing I want to do is take a quick look back at week 5. The top 5 projected running backs last week were McCaffrey, Cook, Elliott, Johnson from Arizona, and Kamara. The actual top 5 scoring running backs were Jones from Green Bay with 52.20 points, McCaffrey with 50.70 points, Jacobs from Oakland with 32.30 points, Cook 29.80 points, and Lindsay with 27.70 points. I was stuck on Elliott and Johnson, and as I mentioned in my recap video, I totally missed the boat on Aaron Jones, and I also mentioned that I was lower on McCaffrey than everyone else, but I'm pretty convinced that this guy is definitely matchup proof. He was actually my number 1 pick in my season-long team, which I've been doing well because of him. So I will probably never discount McCaffrey again. But this week, he's actually not even on the main slate. That's another thing I wanted to mention. The Tampa Bay Carolina game is actually going to be in England, and the game will be played at 9:30 in the morning Eastern Standard Time. So he won't be on the main slate. And if you have him in a season-long contest, make sure you check your lineups early in the morning on Sunday. Also, teams will be on bye weeks, and I believe this week is Indianapolis, Buffalo, Oakland, and there's one more that's on the bye. I believe Chicago on a bye week. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, top 5 scoring running backs last week generated a total of 126 touches between them. And I'll break all this down and it'll make better sense for you. But 126 total touches, which was 100 carries and 26 receptions between the top 5 scoring. That broke down to 25.2 touches as an average between the top 5. That's why when I build lineups, I like to use the running back in the flex position, and I'm shooting for 65 or more total touches. And that's why touches are really important. And like last week, the top 5 averaged 25 apiece. And if you'd have took any combination of those 3, you'd have been well over 65 touches. Now those top 5, as I mentioned, they averaged 25.2 touches between them. They scored a total of 192.70 fantasy points, which was 38.54 fantasy points apiece. Last week was an outlier, one of the highest scoring fantasy weeks that I can remember. You had 2 running backs that scored over 50 points, Jones and McCaffrey. So, not saying that can't happen again, but that was an outlier. And so, with the top 5 averaging 38.54 fantasy points, that breaks down to 1.53 points per touch. Excuse me. That's not a carry. That's touches. That's carries and receptions combined, and that's with everything being relevant. Remember, touchdowns, fumbles, yards, receptions, all that's factored into that. Now let's look at what the numbers tell us through the first 5 weeks. First, let's look at touches. Touches are a clear indicator for expected fantasy points. These are the top running backs when you break down touches. Fournette, number 115 touches. He has 95 rushes and 20 receptions. It comes out to 23 touches a game. Cook from Minnesota, 113 touches, 92 rushes, and 21 receptions. Comes out to 22.6 touches per game. Chubb, 109 touches, 94 rushes, and 15 receptions. Comes out to 21.8 touches per game. Carson from Seattle, 109 touches, 94 rushes, and 15 receptions, exact same as Chubb, and they're playing each other this week. That's really interesting. For 21.8 touches per game. And Henry from Tennessee, 103 touches, comes out to 98 rushes and only 5 receptions. $507 fantasy points, which further breaks down to 0.92 per touch with all things relevant. It should be noted that the top 5 average 21.96 touches per game and 20.28 fantasy points per game. Week 5 scoring obviously drove that average up. And remember, the top 5 in Week 5 averaged 1.53 points per touch, but the overall average through the first 5 weeks comes out to a more reasonable 0.92 points per touch. And again, this is why I like to use a running back if possible in the flex position, because touches correlate with fantasy points expected, and I feel like running back is one of the most consistent positions week in and week out. And if you're looking at total touches and you can expect close to 1 point per touch, that can give you a good idea of, that's why you want running backs, 3 running backs to get up above 65 or hopefully more touches combined. I also want to factor in snap percentage and correlate snap percentage with fantasy points per offensive snaps. Just being on the field. I'm going to break that down into points as well. and these results are really interesting. Le'Veon Bell is on the field for 96% of his team snaps. That gives him 0.39 points per snap. Whether he touches the ball, runs a route, whatever, all things relevant, just being on the field, 0.39 points per snap. And his team's averaging 68 snaps per game. Fournette from Jacksonville, he's on the field for 89% of his team's total snaps, slightly higher than Le'Veon Bell at 0.40 points per snap and 48 snaps a game. Johnson from Arizona, he's on the field for 81% of his team snaps. Same as Fournette at 0.40 points per snap for 46 snaps per game. Austin Eckler. Now remember, his net numbers are going to be affected because Melvin Gordon's back. But through the first 5 weeks, Eckler's on the field for 73% of his team snaps, scoring 0.68 points per snap, higher than the other 3 before him, and that comes out to 38.8 snaps per game. Chubb, he's on the field for 73% of his team snaps. He's scoring 0.49 fantasy points per snap, and he's on the field for 40.8 snaps a game. And next is Elliott. He's on the field for 72% of his team snaps. And remember, the first game for Elliott, they were working him back in, so he didn't get that high of a workload. Last week, he he got some snaps, but the game script affected him where they had to basically do away with the run game and go into catch up mode for the majority of the game. But Elliott is on the field for 72% of his team snaps, and I'm sure that'll go up by the end of the season, scoring .463 points per snap, and it comes out to 38.8 snaps per game. The running back with the highest fantasy points per snaps doesn't have the highest, isn't in the top 6 on snap percentage, but that's actually Dalvin Cook. He's on the field for 60% of his team's snaps, and he's scoring .80 points per snap. So when he's out there, he's almost worth a point per snap, and he's getting 34 snaps per game. Also notable are the teams with the highest total snaps on offense. If they're running more plays, obviously this gives their players more opportunities. Number one is New Orleans. Through 5 weeks, they've run a total of 317 plays, which comes out to 63.4 per game. The running back in that offense, obviously, is Alvin Kamara. Number two is Baltimore. 315 total snaps. Comes out to 63 offensive snaps per game. Their running back is Ingram. Miami is number three, surprisingly, I guess because teams are scoring a lot and giving them the ball back, but they're scoring a lot and scoring fast. But they've ran 314 offensive plays, and they're averaging 62.8 plays per game. Their running back is Drake and Balaj. Rams have ran 309 plays in the first 5 weeks, comes out to 61.8 points, or 61.8 plays per game. Obviously, that's Gurley and Mack. And Philadelphia has ran 294 plays, and that's 58.8 offensive plays per game. And the running backs there are Howard and Sanders, and the coach, I remember coach speak, but the coach has mentioned that he wants to get Howard the ball even more. Howard is getting a lot of the red zone and goal line touches, and I'll actually talk about him here shortly. This gives those teams the running back, their running backs, the potential for more carries, and those are again Kamara, Ingram, Drake, Gurley, Howard, and Sanders. These running backs are garnering the most receptions per snap. I thought that was an interesting number to consider. This is important for Draftkings because of the full point PPR. Thompson with Washington, he's because of receptions, 0.15 points per snap. Doesn't sound like much, but it adds up to a lot. These are running backs that are targeted a lot, and when they're out there, this is the points that they're getting just by being out there. Samuels from Pittsburgh, 0.14 points per snap. Connor from Pittsburgh, 0.14 points per snap. That's interesting, two running backs from the same team. And Eckler from the Chargers, 0.12 points per snap. Touchdowns are very volatile, but identifying the running backs who are getting the most carries in the red zone can give you an edge. These are the running backs with their carries inside the 20 and inside the 10 and inside the 5. I broke it down total. Leading the way is Ezekiel Elliott with 15 total. That's 77.3% of his offense's carries in this inside the red zone. He's had nine of those 15 were inside the 10, and 4 of those were inside the 5. Next is Ingram. He has 11 total inside the red zone, 42% of his team's total. 11 inside the 10, and 7 of those were inside the 5. Next is Henry from Tennessee. He's had 11 total, which is 77.8% of his team's carries inside the red zone. 9 of those 11 were inside the 10, and 4 of those were inside the 5. And it should mention that those 4, he's the only running back that they've used inside the 5-yard line. So if they get down there, it's going to be Henry. And those opportunities aren't as much as people think. It's not like a team gets down there 8 or 9 times a game. I mean, I'm sure some teams could be an outlier, but this just points out the running backs that when they do get down there, because touchdowns, like I mentioned, are so volatile, you need to find a way to get a little bit of an edge, and that's what I'm doing by identifying these running backs. So Howard with Philadelphia, I said I would be mentioning him. He's had 13 total carries inside the red zone, and that's 46.7% of his team's total. 8 of those 13 were inside the 10, and 5 of those were inside the 5. Carson for Seattle's had 9 total carries inside the red zone. That's 61.9% of his team's total. 4 of those have been inside the 10, and 1 of those has been inside the 5. And lastly, Fournette has had 15 total, which is 76.5% of his team's carries inside the red zone. 5 of his carries have been inside the 10. Only 1's been inside the 5, but he's the only one that's had a carry. So he's 100%, but there's only been 1 opportunity inside the 5 as far as rushing. Lastly, and certainly not least, I want to identify the running backs with the best matchups by identifying the teams that are bleeding points to the running back position. They are as follows. Miami, the worst on this week's main slate. They're allowing 40.8 points per game to the running back position. This week they face off against Washington with their new coach, Callahan, who has a propensity to lean on the running game, and their running backs are Adrian Peterson and Chris Thompson. Next is Cincinnati. They're allowing 39 points per game to the running back. This week they face off against Baltimore and Mark Ingram. Next is Dallas. They're allowing 29.9 points per game. This week they face Le'Veon Bell and the Jets. It's really Dallas's numbers are a little bit inflated after what happened to them last week by Aaron Jones. I am a Dallas fan, but the numbers are what they are, and they've been getting beat up in the running game. And now they're going to face the guy who is, as I mentioned earlier, it's getting 96%. He's on the field 96% of the time and getting all the carries, and so that could be a really good matchup for the Jets. Denver is allowing 29.5 points per game. This week they're playing Tennessee and Derrick Henry. Washington, they're allowing 28.8 points per game. This week they're facing Miami and running back Kenyon Drake. Jacksonville, they're allowing 28.3 points per game to the running back position. This week they get Alvin Kamara. And last week, I could see a situation where Kamara is going to be real popular this week because everybody's seen what happened to him last week and what Christian McCaffrey did. So I'll be watching ownership. But if that drives up recency bias, drives up ownership, then I'll probably be staying off Kamara. In Cleveland, they're allowing 27.9 points per game. This week they get Seattle, and their running back is Chris Carson. I'm sure you're wondering, what does all this tell us? It's a lot of numbers, and that's what I'm here for. I'm going to put it all together for you. I'm going to tell you the running backs I'm targeting using this information, and I'll sum it up and tell you why. Ezekiel Elliott. And these aren't in like a certain order. When I do my lineup building video on Friday, I'll have the ones that I'm going to actually put in a couple lineups that I'm going to use. But these aren't in any particular order. Elliott is the most. Yeah, he's the most expensive at 8,500. He's getting 72% of his team's total snaps. So he's the one that he's the bell cow on Dallas's team. He's getting 19.2 touches per game. He's averaging 18 points a game. And if they don't turn the ball over, this week is probably Zeke's game. You can see a situation where a combination of Dak, Cooper, Zeke put the Jets away early and seal it away with Zeke. If the Jets get ahead or do what Green Bay did, then that eliminates Zeke from the game script. The Jets are allowing 25.2 points per game to the running back, and what might happen is because what Aaron Jones did to Dallas, the ownership might actually go to Le'Veon Bell, which will drive down the ownership of Zeke Elliott. And Zeke could actually end up being a contrarian play because he does have the highest salary on the board at $8,500. So if that's the case, then that'll be something else to consider. But we'll have to watch ownership and consider that on Friday. Next is Alvin Kamara. He's $8,000. Jacksonville's allowing 28.3 fantasy points per game. They're allowing 122 rushing yards and 36.8 receiving yards to the running back position. New Orleans is, as I mentioned earlier, averaged the most offensive plays per game at 63.4 plays a game. My concerns are ownership in this game as well because of what McCaffrey did to Jacksonville last week. That may make people want to go to Kamara with some recency bias as a result of last week's results. He's $500 less than Elliott, and he has received 15 red zone touches. So he's one to definitely consider in your player pool. Next is Fournette. He's $6,700. He's getting 23 touches a game, 89% of his team snaps. So he's out there regardless of the, he's not game script dependent. He's scoring 0.40 points per snap. So just being out there, he is worthy of some more fantasy points expected. And he seems like he has a nice, safe floor because, he is going to be out there, win, lose, or draw. He's on the field, and he just had a really big week. Let me see here. Yeah, against Carolina, even though, that game was back and forth. Christian McCaffrey had his way. He had 108 yards rushing, 29 yards receiving, one touchdown run, and for 26.7 points. See here, he's had 2 games in a row where he was over 26 points. So he'll be a nice. He could be a nice pivot off the top running backs at $6,700 this week. Next is Le'Veon Bell. Dallas is allowing 29.9 points per game. He's on the field for 96% of his team snaps. He's scoring 0.39 points per snap. I don't want to get caught up in the recency bias from last week, but as I was mentioning with Elliott, if that's not an outlier and Dallas's defense is really that bad against the run, you could see a situation where Le'Veon Bell just gets a ton of touches, and Dallas, they had a hard time with Aaron Jones. It could quite possibly be the same thing with Le'Veon Bell. Also, Darnold's back, so it's not like they can stack the box like they did against when Falk was in the game for the Jets. Teams were able to stack the box and try to shut down the Bell running game. So He's a $2,100 savings off of Elliott. I'm going to be watching ownership on that closely, see which way people are going to go. That's how I'm going to get leverage. I really like the running back position this week, and I feel like there's a lot of value. Le'Veon Bell is not game script dependent. Obviously, he's on the field for 96% of his team snaps. So he's one to pay real close attention to, and at $6,400, I think he could be a real true value. Next is Dalvin Cook. He's $8,400. He's averaging 22.6 touches a game. I'm not really crazy about that price because I feel like if I was there, I would probably go on up to Elliott. Philadelphia is pretty decent against the run, and you could see a situation where they sell out to stop Cook. Now, they do have an issue with the passing game and running backs that can catch the ball. So perhaps that's where Cook will get his points. He's the second highest running back on the slate. I think his ownership is going to be lower because he's only $100 less than Elliott. He could possibly be a contrarian play too, coming out of the backfield and Cousins dropping it off to him. But I think Minnesota is going to be using more of the Thielen and Diggs game this week. So we'll talk more about that when we build. I did put him in the player pool because of his touches a game and the percentage of the offense that he has for Minnesota. Number 6 is Ingram, 6,600, and he is my favorite play so far this week. Cincinnati's giving up a horrible 39 points per game to the running back position. He's a home favorite. That's another thing I look for with running backs is home favorites or big favorites. I can tell you a little bit about what the expected game script's going to be. If he's, he had a really good game against Kansas City, scored 3 touchdowns, and could see that situation if they can take Cincinnati out of the game. Baltimore's defense is not very good, though. So if Cincinnati is able to keep pace or get a lead, that could possibly hinder Ingram and take him out of the equation. I don't think that's going to happen, and I really like this play this week. Baltimore's running the second most offensive plays with 63 offensive plays per game. He's had 11 red zone carries and 7 carries inside the 5-yard line. So when they get down there, he's the one getting the ball. The only other person that you really have to worry about would be Lamar Jackson vulturing some runs, but I don't think they want Lamar Jackson taking unnecessary hits, and they're pounding the ball in there with Ingram. I will definitely have him in some of my lineups. Last, number 7 is Henry. He's averaging 20.6 touches per game. He's had 11 red zone carries. He's had all their team's carries inside the 5. It's only 4, but he's had all of them. When they get down there, he's the one that's getting the ball. Denver's allowing 29.5 fantasy points per game to the running back. So he's getting, the big share of the touches. He's the red zone running back, and Denver's giving it up to the running back. So, and at $6,100, he's another running back that I'm definitely going to be on. I'm going to watch ownership. If everyone's spending down, maybe I'll go up. Or if they're spending up, grabbing the top 2 or 3, Elliott, Cook, or Kamara, I might go down and really be interested in Henry and Ingram. And there's a couple other that I wanted to mention real quick. Drake from Miami. Washington's allowing 28.8 fantasy points per game to the running back position. Drake is $4,400. I just have this sneaky feeling about Drake this weekend. He might be a nice flex plug-in. He's not in the top in any of the categories, But if Washington's giving up points like that to the running back, maybe it's his turn against them. And another one at $6,000 is Carson from Seattle. They're a small road favorite. And Cleveland's allowing 27.9 fantasy points per game. He's getting 21.8 touches a game. He's had 9 red zone carries. So he's the guy they're giving the ball to when they're down there. And I think Seattle will definitely score against Cleveland. It's just a matter of if it's going to be on Russell Wilson or are they just going to try to control the game with Carson. So summing up, I really liked the running back position this week. I will be focused on getting 3 running backs in my lineup. And one of the main things for me is touches and snap percentages. I'm going to get the high use running backs in my lineup and bank on those. Nothing's guaranteed, but those more secure points. And I'm focusing on getting. I have a goal of 70 or more. If I'm going to use 3 running backs, I want 70 or more touches between them. And recapping again, these are the running backs that I am going to be targeting: Elliott, Kamara, Fournette, Bell, Cook, Ingram, Drake, and Carson. I'm going to be watching ownership on all of these through the week, to gain leverage. And you always look for value. You have to think about game script and all those things are relevant in selecting. If I can spend down at running back, I could possibly spend up in other positions. I think this would be the week that you can get away with spending down. There's a lot of value in some of the lower salary running backs this week. Remember, touches, home favorites, or teams that are really big favorites. Remember, red zone touches. All these are important when you're selecting your running back position. So there you have it. Probably put a lot in on you. Your brain's probably fried with all those numbers. I tried to summarize it the best that I could for you and put it together. And then I will be back, remember, Friday, build some lineups and show you the ones that I'm going to use. And sometimes I add, sometimes I subtract. If I do that, I'll tell you on Friday which ones I'm adding or subtracting. I can tell you right now, I really don't like that Dalvin Cook price at 8,400, but I'm gonna watch ownership and see if maybe that's a more contrarian play than anything. Don't forget to join me tomorrow. I'm going to be posting my wide receiver video, and then I'll be posting my tight end defensive special teams video. And I'm also going to try to get out a smaller video on the showdown between the Giants and New England. That game's supposed to have some really horrible weather. I even heard one person talking whether or not the game would even be played, talking about an inch of rain an hour and 25-mile-an-hour winds. So we'll have to see what's going on with that. But thank you for joining me, hanging in there with me. I'd really appreciate it if you would hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you get notified when I do post my next video. Feel free to drop any comments below. I try to answer them all, and I appreciate any comments, anything you want different. Or last night during my showdown video, or Monday night during my showdown video, Ryan actually put a message that Jeff Wilson wasn't playing for the 49ers, and I really appreciate that. And always on Sunday before, and if you play in the showdown slates, always look at the last second injury report. They have to post that at 11:30 in the morning on Sundays. And don't forget don't forget the Tampa Bay Carolina game is actually at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday, so they won't be on the main slate. But again, if you have them in your season, any of those players from those teams on your season-long team, make sure you have them in or out or whatever you're going to do with that. Again, thank you for joining me. My name is Ty Patton. This is all about winning daily fantasy sports, and I'll see you real soon. Thanks a lot.